So today's last day of May and the last day of AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander Month. So I thought I would talk about George Takei. George Takei, Mr. Sulu from Star Trek. You know I like Star Trek. He is also an activist. He is also an author. He is also a great follower on social media. His book, They Called Us Enemy, was a New York Times best-selling graphic novel. Currently, it is a choice for something called One Book, One Coast, where libraries in California, Oregon, and Washington are all reading the book and then having group discussions about it. So I brought a copy of one of his other books, My Lost Freedom, by George Takei, illustrated by Michelle Lee, and I thought I would share some highlights from the book, so as not to read the whole thing. So, no, I've got it. I just want to make, the wind makes it more challenging. I am a grandson and son of immigrants. My father was brought to San Francisco when he was a boy. My mother was born in Sacramento, California, to parents who had immigrated. Like all immigrants to America, my father and my grandparents came to this country boldly seeking a new life and opportunities. I was just 4 years old when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, and the lives of all Japanese Americans were suddenly and drastically changed. The next day, the president declared war on Japan. February 19th, 1942, now commemorated as the Day of Remembrance, was a day that we Japanese Americans will never forget. The president ordered all Japanese Americans living on the West Coast to be rounded up and jailed in prison camps. It was all scary and confusing. Bang, bang, bang. Our U.S. Army soldiers pounded on the door. They ordered us to leave our home on Garnet Street in Los Angeles. We took only what we could carry and were sent to the Santa Anita racetrack. Each family was assigned a horse stall to sleep in, still stinky from the stench of horse manure. A few months later, we moved again, this time by train. We journeyed 3 days and 2 nights, and finally our train huffed through the green lushness of Arkansas to our destination, Camp Roar. We at Camp Roar were many kinds of people, farmers and fishermen, shopkeepers and doctors, truck drivers and school teachers. We were young as baby Reiko and as old as 80-year-old Mrs. Cato. We were a mix of immigrants and American-born. Some were from hot, dry Arizona, some from wet, green Oregon. Most of us were from northern, central, and southern California. We were all so different, yet we had one thing in common. We were all Japanese Americans. We needed to work together as a community. I began kindergarten at Roar as we recited with liberty and justice for all from the Pledge of Allegiance. I could see the fence and sentry tower right outside the schoolhouse. I was too young to know that these words meant the very opposite of being guarded by soldiers in a barbed wire camp. We had been at Roar for a year when the government changed its mind. Now they needed young men and women to serve in the war. But all of us Japanese Americans had been classified as enemy aliens. How could enemies serve as U.S. soldiers? Everyone in the camp over the age of 17 had to answer a list of questions. For Daddy and Mama, these were trick questions, especially numbers 27 and 28. Daddy and Mama both thought the 2 questions were stupid. The only honest answers were no and no. Those who answered yes were drafted by the government to fight for America and Europe. My parents, by answering firmly and honestly, were branded disloyal and forced to leave Camp Roar. We would be sent back across the country to a harsher camp called Camp Chuli Lake in Northern California. Camp Chuli Lake was called a segregation camp for disloyals. It was nothing like the lush and verdant swampland of Camp Roar. Chuli Lake was a maximum security prison with 3 layers of barbed wire fences, sentry towers equipped with machine guns pointed right at us, and huge rumbling tanks. Chuli Lake was the largest of 10 prison camps and held the most inmates, more than 18,000 people. Half of them were children, like Henry, Reiko, and me. Half a world away, bewildering events were taking place. Young men who had answered yes, yes to questions 27 and 28 had become U.S. soldiers in the all-Japanese American 442nd Regimental Combat Team. They were wearing the same uniforms as the sentry guards staring down at us. They were fighting heroically on far-off European battlefields, carrying the American flag. In yet another part of the world, across the Pacific, unimaginable events were taking place as well. The atomic bomb was dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These 2 bombings were the most ghastly devastation the world had ever experienced. We now had to adjust to the news that the hard, terrible war was over. America was celebrating its victory. Suddenly, the government was releasing us from camp as abruptly as we had been imprisoned. After 4 years behind barbed wire, we had nothing because the U.S. government had taken everything. Each of us was given $25 and a one-way ticket anywhere in the United States. My daddy and mama said, let's start all over in Los Angeles. Even though they had heard that our old hometown was still hostile to Japanese Americans. It was a long train's journey back to Los Angeles. But we were all together again, a family again in our hometown, ready to build our future. Woo. So it wasn't until 1988 that the United States and President Reagan formally apologized for the internment of Japanese Americans, and reparations were made. And as I was reading this and thinking about this, I was thinking about the parallels to today's detention centers, in particular the Dilley Detention Center in Texas, which is the largest family detention center in the U.S. with a 2,400 person capacity for immigrant processing. Many of these children who are retained there, of course, were born in America and are American citizens. And I think, what stories will these families tell? What books will those children write? And will the U.S. ever apologize to them? So, thank you.